All right, and welcome back. Hope you guys didn't really go anywhere. Very short break. But anyway, all right, so as I said before the break, the topic that we're going to dig into, today is, does the school sports system prepare the players well? Does it actually prepare the players well for the professional levels? Okay. Now, the three sports that we're going to be looking at is the three sports that we always look at in our podcast. Right, we're going to discuss professional soccer, professional rugby, and also professional basketball. We're going to look at those three sporting systems. Okay. Now, obviously, just to start off with, school sports, man, that is one of the most exciting time, in a developing athlete's life, because that is where they're literally, learning and developing, falling and getting up. That's basically where, a lot of the players' characters is developed, and a lot of their confidence is also developed as well. That, oh shit, I might have something here, or, oh shit, I might be able to actually take this to another level. But, what we're going to also discuss on the show is, does the school sports system, though, paint the full picture of what's awaiting the athlete, within the professional levels? Because I think this is where the disconnect comes. Just because a player was, exceptional at school level, that doesn't always translate or, make the leap into the pro ranks. A lot of things, a lot of factors come into play when, approaching the professional ranks, after leaving school. And obviously that is, things like, the tempo of the game changes. Because now you're sort of doing this more regularly than you would at school level. Because at school level, remember, you still got to wake up, you got to go to school all day, and then afterwards, you get into the sporting routine. Whereas when you're heading for the pro ranks, your day is filled up with your sport routines, whether that's gym, getting into the gym, into the weight room, hitting the weights. After that, hitting a field session. After that, hitting a psychology session. After that, doing a skill session, like individual skill session. So there's so many different routines and habits that have to take place, when journeying into the pro ranks. And I feel this is where the disconnect comes when athletes have to now transition either, even their mindset from being a schoolboy player or schoolgirl player to now entering the professional ranks. All right. So let's look at soccer first. Let's have a look at soccer first. All right. So within, the football industry, within soccer, I think everybody will know that, school soccer, high school soccer isn't exactly the biggest thing in the world. All right. I'm not going to talk for all countries. Obviously, I haven't been to every single country in the world, but I'm just going to talk about, countries that I've lived in, South Africa and the other 6 countries. What I noticed was school soccer wasn't the biggest thing. It really, really, really wasn't. What is big in the development stages of a player, of a high school caliber player within soccer, is the big name brand academies. All right. So if you're a person who's living in like Paris Saint-Germain, like who's living in Paris, would join like a Paris Saint-Germain academy. If you're a person living in Manchester, you join like a Manchester United academy. If you're a person who's living in South Africa, you'd be joining the Orlando Pirates, Kaizer Chiefs, or Mamelodi Sundowns academy, or SuperSport United academy setup. All right. High school soccer is there. It is a thing that is there. And there are a few schools. I know in South Africa, Benoni High had one of the biggest reputations for being a decent, soccer school. But, that's only one school, literally, that I know of, So it is a thing that's there. High school soccer is there, but it doesn't get the exposure that these big name brands and the credibility that these big name brands basically give the player that comes out of the academies. All right. It's totally different to basketball and rugby, but we'll touch on those later. Now, one of the advantages, of basically being involved in these big name academies is the fact that, players are able to, they're able to start dreaming big from a young age. And when they start dreaming big from a young age, that has its advantages because they know what to push for. Okay, because imagine this: you're in the setup, big name, football brand, Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United, Pirates, and all that stuff. You're in the setup, you're in their kit. You know the ranks that you've got to go. So if you, let's say, playing under 12 for one of these big name brands, you know that they're still under 15, you know that they're still under 16, under 17, and under 19, and then eventually there's the big team because you watch them almost every weekend on television. All right, so I believe that it sort of like creates the dream so much earlier for the players, for them to be able to start laying out the plan that, okay, this is what I got to work for, this is what I got to work for. Whereas I'm guessing, for the players, I'm guessing playing at high school, high school soccer, it's just, okay, I'm just going to shoot for my, teams under 14A, under 15A and whatnot, and I'll see where that goes, So I believe, honestly, with the football structures, they have been smart, the big teams have been smart in that way that they've, they sort of inject the dream in the player from a young age, man. But obviously, things happen, things change and everything, and not all those players make it to those ranks. And we're going to look at what is the possible cause for that. All right, because obviously, being able to dream big and then being able to follow a sort of like training routine, because at these academies, they also make them do drills that are a bit more high level than what they would be doing at their schools. Because don't get me wrong, while these players are attending academies with these big teams, they're still playing for their high schools as well. All right, so it's sort of like a best of both worlds type of thing. But even with that, man, it doesn't always, translate, or it doesn't always result in these guys getting big contracts once they're done with their academy stages. And obviously, when looking at it, you can't blame all the teams and say that, yeah, all the teams are like that. No, not all the teams are like that. But some are like that in the sense that while you develop the kids, physically and skill-wise, I feel like they don't do it holistically. I feel like they're not developing these kids mentally. Because a lot of them, sometimes they attend these academies, but when they come out, they still don't have the mindset of a professional. Right? And that is the troubling part, that, whoa, you spent all this, all these years in the academy, but, they still lack either whether it's a self-discipline to, get up in the morning and go for a run, or the self-motivation, let me put it like that. The self-motivation. Because that's what you find from some of the players. But you know what? With that, you can't really blame the structures that they were put in. I think what it all comes down to from that retrospect is pretty much your self-motivation and your hunger and desire to actually make it in the game. I think that's what it comes down to. But really, man, when you look at it on paper, the path is almost set up for for young developing soccer players, for them to succeed. Because when you get that amount of exposure in a professional team at such a young age, that should also make it, almost make it second nature for you. By the time you hit 16, 17, 18, all of this, it should be involuntary, man, within you. It should be wired in you that, okay, this is what we got to do. So that's why I do believe that within those structures, it does come down to self-motivation. It does come down to hunger. All right. You can take the horse to the water, man, but you can't make it drink. Yeah. But I still do commend the system. But I do think though that the sporting federations of the countries also need to invest more in high school soccer. In Japan, don't get me wrong, high school soccer does have some sort of a presence. It does have some sort of exposure. I know that there is a big under 18 tournament that takes place every year where the top Japanese high schools they meet at like sort of like a festival, and they play against each other. And like I said, it gets media exposure. It gets televised. The games get televised. I think literally this is the only country that I've lived in where I see high school soccer being televised. Right? I could be wrong. Maybe in the States there were high school soccer was televised as well, but because the state I was living in, soccer doesn't have that much of a presence. I mean, I was in Washington D.C., Bethesda, Washington D.C., and yeah, basically, I mean, that's pretty much football country, man. American football, basketball, ice hockey, lacrosse, and those other sports. So the whole time I was there, I never saw a high school soccer game on TV. All right. But I'm not going to dismiss. You never know. I mean, that was pretty much 10 years ago. Who knows? Maybe things have changed now. Maybe soccer is getting more exposure because soccer has grown in the United States in the past decade. I mean, you see with the MLS nowadays. All right. So, yeah. So that's pretty much where the development stage is. And whether or not the players are prepared well, I would say it's a cases of a yeses and nos, man. It's a yeses and nos. I think with the structures put in place by these big brand teams, I would say yes. In a perfect world, they are giving these kids the tools to basically go to the next level. But I think when you really do sit down and assess it, when you're looking at from a no part, it's that what it comes down to literally is the players' self-motivation and dedication, whether they really are hungry for this opportunity or not. Because being thrust into such a privileged system, it can go both ways. It can go either way, man. It can either motivate the guy to take the opportunity and run with it, or it can make the guy just relax and feel, entitled and not really want to do the work. All right. So, yeah, it's a case of yeses and nos. But, I mean, the system has its pros and cons. All right. So now let's have a look at a sport like rugby. Okay. So rugby, it needs no introduction, man. Schoolboy rugby is, man, it's massive. It's really massive. And the thing about it is that it's not only big in the country that I grew up in South Africa only. Nah, I mean, when I lived in Hong Kong, I met a lot of guys like from New Zealand and Australia and England. We were like blended, dude. And I remember how we used to share, stories of our school rugby days. And you'd hear guys who went to school in New Zealand and Australia talk about, how big schoolboy rugby is. And you'd be like, oh shit, so it's not only in South Africa. Damn. So, I mean, obviously in South Africa, you get your big schools, man. Your Grey Blooms, your Queen's Colleges, your Pretoria Boys High, your Affies. Then from the Cape, you get your Battle Gyms, Paul Boys, Bishops, Durban. You get your Durban Westville Boys. You get, oh man, there's so many schools. Your Michael Houses, your Hilton Colleges. So there are so many schools, and it's the exposure within South Africa. I mean, the schoolboy rugby derbies, most of the time, they are televised. All right, so the sport gets so much exposure. But again, with all this exposure and, the excitement, that circulates, that surrounds schoolboy rugby, whether in SA or in other countries, does it prepare the players well? All right. Now, one word to describe, man, schoolboy rugby is passion. Dude, fuck. The guys are passionate about, their school's jumpers, man. The guys, they're willing to lay their bodies on the fucking line for their school jumper. And obviously, you get guys that dominate the school ranks. They dominate from age group rugby right up until they get to open rugby and first team rugby. And then it just, and then they fail to take the next step, and we're going to look at why, and, we're going to look at the possible factors as to why is that. That's why in the beginning of the topic, I said that I do believe that, schoolboy or schoolgirl sport, it doesn't paint half the picture of what's awaiting these guys. Because a lot of the players, they fall into that trap that, okay, I'm dominating high school rugby, so this should mean that the road is clear. And then they find out once they finish, high school, when they're drafted into a, like a pro academy system, that's where, guys start to fall short. I'll give you an example. So when I finished high school, I entered the Purka Rugby Institute, which is affiliated with the Leopards Rugby Union down in Potchefstroom, which is about 2 hours from 2 hours from Pretoria, an hour from Joburg. All right, so when we entered the academy as under 19s, there were literally about 100. I think there were about close to like 150 or 150 plus guys that entered the academy, and they said this to us. They said this to us. Like at the first meeting that we had, we're like sitting in like sort of like an amphitheater sort of set up, and you look around, you see just all these buff guys sitting around, and you're like, fuck, how the hell am I gonna make the team, man? But I'll never forget what the coaches said at the beginning. They were like, look around you, there's like 150 plus of you. They're like, I guarantee you, in 4 weeks' time, after we've completed the first phase of the training program, there'll probably be around 120 of you. And obviously, everyone's got that, nah, I'm not going to quit. Nah, I'm not going to quit. Fine, the training started, where we had to wake up literally sometimes at like 5 o'clock to go have a training session on the field. Dude. And mind you, some of us, we don't have cars, but obviously I was lucky that I would always ride with one of my one of the other boys, because I was living in the rugby house. You're driving to the field, it's still dark. Imagine that. You're driving to the field, it's still dark. You get there and you're like, whoa, man, these numbers have shrunk, overnight. It's what the coaches said is exactly what happened. And I kid you not. 4 weeks later, I promise you, we had gone down from 150 plus to about 110, 120. And every time we'd have a meeting, the coaches would tell you, we're going to level up in training now. And that includes your strength and conditioning, your gym work, basically the dedication that you have to put in. And they were like, we guarantee you by June, there'll be about 80 of you left. And that's exactly how it panned out. By the time, to cut the long story short, by the time we were preparing for the Under-19 Currie Cup, Under-19 Provincial Tournament, there was literally about 50 or 60 of us left. The squad, obviously the Currie Cup squad, they only could select about 30. So the other guys were basically like the fringe players that were left over. But imagine that. Entering the academy in January, we were about 150 plus. By June, we were down to 80. By the time the Currie Cup started, we were down to about 50 or 60 guys that were left over. So that's pretty much what I'm saying. And mind you, the guys who quit, these were not suckers, dude. Everyone who entered the academy was a guy who was dominating at the high school level in rugby. All right. So it made me ask the question that Why do some players, fail to make that jump? And it's obviously I think many of them are unaware of what it really takes to become a professional. They're unaware that, listen, to get on this journey, you're going to have to follow this type of routine. You're going to have to you're going to have to train more than once a day. You're going to need to dedicate yourself to being able to get into the gym, go on the field, do a skill session, get into the psychology, get into the psychology sessions, and try not to miss any of these sessions. Imagine doing that, and that's going to be your life every single day. You're not going to have the normal student life. I usually tell this to people. I never had the normal student life. This was literally my day-to-day from when I was 19 until I was 21. This was my routine. Good players fell away, guys. Good players fell away. But obviously, the pros of playing schoolboy rugby is that, you're the exposure that it gives players. I do believe, especially when you're in a country like South Africa, and you're playing schoolboy rugby, it literally does almost set you up for the next step. But it doesn't guarantee, though. But because of all the media coverage and the TV coverage, it does open the door. Guys just need to step in it. But the cons of it, though, is that I don't think the guys are really prepared well mentally for that next step. And I think where a lot of this fell short, but a lot of schools are changing it now, where they try to get someone like a professional rugby coach to actually coach the first team. Because what needs to happen for these guys, man, is just for someone to just really sit down with them. Single out the players that you really, that coaches feel, okay, these guys are elite. They're showing elite signs. You pull them aside, and I think you really start, to have that conversation. And first, obviously, gauge that what is it they want out of this game. And I think once you figured out the guys' goals, you basically let them know that, listen, I really do believe that you can play rugby at the next level, but getting to the next level, what we do here at school, unfortunately, isn't going to be enough. That's when you start demanding more from them. All right. That's when you start, encouraging and basically sort of take on like a mentorship role where you tell them, all right, this is what it takes to get to the pros. Because I could tell you, man, with the big schools, that's pretty much what they do. They get guys who are professional coaches or guys who've coached at pro ranks so that they're able to, implore their knowledge on the guys that, listen, this is what it's going to take for you to get to the next level. You're good, but, the effort that you're putting in at the moment, if you're going to put this amount of effort at the next level, you're going to fall short. I feel that guys need to hear that because it also grounds them as well, and it lets them know that there's still more to go. There's still more work to do. Because, when you're getting good and you're dominating schoolboy rugby, it's easy to develop an ego and think that, hey, man, you've got it made. And that's where you need that mentor and that coach that pulls you aside and has those conversations with you. For me, man, personally, I didn't think about professional rugby until I was like in my 11th, I was in like the 11th grade in my junior year, if you in America, in my junior year or in the 11th grade, where after we played Academy Week in Uppington, I remember one of the coaches, man, he pulled me aside. He's like, yeah, you're going to be a senior next year. You're going to be matric. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, what are your plans for after school? I'm like, I'm probably going to go off and study in university. I'm like, why? He's like, no, man, I really think you should carry on playing. I really think don't give the game up. He's like, I really think you can play rugby at a professional level at some point. I'm like, what? What does that even mean? Because it's nothing that I had ever thought about. No one in my family had ever pursued a professional sports career. So it was, it was an eye-opening thing. But what he said basically opened my mind up, because with all that, he wasn't stroking my ego. No. He was just telling me that, listen, I think you can go to the next level, but this is what you need to do. Because Jan Hendrik, that was his name, he was a former professional athlete. That's what I'm saying. That's why, it's so important sometimes that, professional athletes do become coaches, because you have so much to give back to these kids. And after Jan Hendrik said that stuff to me, man, we had like an hour conversation where he was telling me, basically what the professional game demands from you. So I already now had that amount of knowledge. So going into my matric year, I was preparing myself, because I started, waking up in the morning, hitting the gym before school, going to school, and then after school, going to practice. So I started the whole training twice a day thing. All because someone pulled me aside and said something to me and said, listen, I really do believe you can play further. And I'm glad I listened, man. I'm glad I listened, because experiencing, professional sports is something, it's an experience I can never articulate into words. So that's where I feel the schoolboy rugby system sort of falls short in preparing guys, is the fact that I think from a mentorship point, the guys are a little bit on their own. And I really do believe if that gap can be bridged, then I think there'd be a lot more success rate for the schoolboy players. But anyway, like I'm saying, guys, these are just my opinions and thoughts, and things that I've seen, things that I've experienced, and things that I've witnessed. I've witnessed guys, man, who are talented to the T, fail to make the jump, to the pro setup. And this is not because guys were lacking talent. No, they still had the talent. But I think, with high school sport, you get so good that you start relying only on your talent. And I think that's where a lot of guys get it wrong. That's where the mentorship comes in. That's where the mentorship becomes crucial in helping these guys prepare for the next step. Where you get a guy and you tell him that, listen, you're good, but there's another level to go, so that they stay hungry. But so that's having a look at high school rugby. But look, schoolboy rugby, man, it's still one of the most passionate. And I mean, nowadays it gets so many scouts over there because of the abundant talent that is just on display. All right, so agents, scouts that go there, coaches that are mentoring these kids, do better. Pull the guy aside and just have a conversation with them. Not an ego-stroking conversation that, you're good, you're going to the pros. No, really sit them down and have an honest conversation that, what do you want out of this game? All right, and now let's have a look at the last sport, which is basketball. Now, in looking at basketball, we're going to use the US as sort of like a benchmark in this scenario, where, high school basketball is massive in the US. Same as high school rugby in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, high school basketball also gets a lot of media exposure. These kids are literally being interviewed after the games. They're being profiled, pre-game and during the game. So, I mean, I guess it's pretty much, it's good media training for the athletes, because it teaches them on how to basically interact and build a relationship with the media. Because as we've seen, one of the most important, success factors or success requirements for professional athletes is actually having a positive relationship with the media. If the media hates you, you're in fucking trouble. You're in trouble. So man, the US basketball athletes, I think they're more under the microscope than anywhere else in the world, because literally every move of theirs is watched. you know, because they get more games televised. Within, high school rugby, you'll probably find that in a season, they'll get maybe very few games televised. Whereas in basketball, they get so many games televised, because of the whole TV rights thing. AAUs have, with your networks and all that stuff. So they definitely get more exposure. And they get a lot more features on like magazines and stuff, Sports Illustrated and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, dude. So there's, I feel like there's a lot of pressure for these guys at such a young age. But again, this helps them because with all this exposure, it created like anomalies that went straight from high school right to the pros. All right. Obviously, and most of these guys that go straight from high schools and onto the pros are usually players that really become revolutionary. Anomalies like your Kevin Garnett's, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, basically almost like, generational talents that are able to emerge. And it's due to the, to the media exposure by, high school basketball. So I guess we would say that those are the pros, the positive parts of high school basketball, within the States. And then obviously, I guess from the negative part, I would say the negative part about them is also, the whole mentorship type of thing. I think, more times than not, a lot of the guys who don't make it into the league or who don't live up to the hype is due to poor mentorship, that they didn't really comprehend what it takes to get to the next level and stay there. Because remember, guys, sometimes you can work your way towards something. It's staying there that matters. You can make it to the league, but can you stay there? Because remember, every single year, guys are coming in, where the guys are also retiring, but new guys are coming in. All right. So I do think, from a con perspective, it's the mentorship. But at least, we've been able to see. Obviously, they keep changing the rules that guys can go from high school to the league, or no, guys have to do a year or two of college, and the rules keep changing for them. But you look at a talent like Zion Williamson as well. Zion was dominant as a high scholar. And you really got to ask yourself, was it really worth it for him going off to college? Because a player like him, with his physical build and everything, he could have gone straight to the league. But obviously, those factors do also come into play at some point. That sometimes players fail to make the jump to the pro leagues, maybe because their physical developments, some cap out. Like some peak, I don't want to say peak at a young age, that really sounds negative. Some stop growing at a certain time. You get guys who get like a massive growth spurt in their teen years, and then they cap out at like 18, and then they just stop growing, And then obviously you get your late bloomers that some guys actually only pick up after they leave high school, where they really start getting, either bulkier and so forth and so forth and so forth. But this is one of those conversations, man, where I don't think there's one right answer for it. But I just thought, I would share my thoughts on just the whole topic of, does the whole school system, does the whole school sports system basically prepare athletes well for the next level? Again, it's a discussion that has a lot of yeses and nos. A lot of yeses and nos. And what it eventually comes down to, for accountability purposes, what it eventually comes down to is the player self-motivated enough? Is the player hungry enough for the opportunity? Is the player dedicated enough to take the opportunity with both hands and just fucking run with it? That's what it all boils down to. There's no such thing as a sure thing. That's pretty much what I'm driving home here, is that Sometimes you can be in the perfect setup. You can go to the perfect school and get the amount of exposure, but still fail to make the jump. And that's not because you weren't good enough for anything. It's just because maybe there's a certain step that you may have overlooked or missed because you may have thought, yeah, I've got it made. Or maybe sometimes you just realized in the middle of chasing this dream that it's not actually what you wanted. There are so many underlying factors, man. So many underlying factors. And I have a feeling that this won't be the last time we talk about such a topic because of how big the development structures and, the schoolboy systems are, in the world of professional sports. Because you got to remember, if it wasn't for the schoolboy systems and the big name brand academies that develop these players, there would be nothing. There would be no players. There would be no player pool for the professional ranks to basically scout from. So the grassroots level are so crucial and they are so important to the professional basketball, to the professional sports ecosystem, basically. Whether it's professional soccer, whether it's professional rugby, or whether it's professional basketball. All right. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that chat, man. I love talking about the development stages because I really do feel that is where players' characters are developed. All right. Proper mentorship, man, and just not stroking a guy's ego, I believe goes a long way. All right. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I got to get my day started. It's a lovely, chilly morning out here in Tokyo, man. Fucking love it. You got to love it. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me on this episode number 25. You've been with your host, Zila, a.k.a. Chester Mbekela. And this is sportsbiz from an agent's perspective. Right, before I go, make sure to support the podcast, guys. Get the merch, which is available. I'll post the link in the description. And for professional soccer players, professional rugby players, and coaches, teams, if you want to sign up on limitlessathlete.net, the website will be in the description. And to anyone who's looking to invest in property, all right, this is a plug-in for Remax. Hit up Remax, man. Your boy is also a partner at Remax as a real estate agent. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Yeah? Take care. All right. Cheers.